I envision that we can then go to individuals, perhaps those living on the street or in transit shelters, and say, you can't stay here. Not because we're kicking you out to go down to another bus shelter or down to some other place, but come with us to the housing that we have for you, with the wraparound supports for you as well, so that people can come off the street and get the shelter and the services they need. Kate, in a committee once, used a term that I completely agree with, and that's the detasking of police. Right now, we've done, at City Hall, we've done the analysis on the 911 calls. What are the 911 calls? What do people need when they're calling 911? Over 50% of the calls that police receive, at their core, are not crime calls. They're not policing calls. So if we could detask the police and separate social services calls from police calls, then we don't, there'll be fewer and fewer times we have to send 2 officers with badges and guns to the calls that really are not crime calls. There's real crime calls, and we need to make sure police are available to do that. I have said I am not in favor of defunding the police, but I'm certainly in favor of and committed to detasking or retasking the police. Our city is a growing city, and so we need to make sure that the men and women of the Winnipeg Police Service are there and available to do the work that they need to do. But we also have to free them up and make sure that when someone and make sure that, more importantly, the right agency is responding to a call for service. Right now we have, anyways, we have an initiative where we're pairing up a plainclothes police officer with a mental health worker. That's an initiative, our alternate response to a citizen in crisis. To me, that initiative and initiatives like that are more important. The plainclothes police officer is there just in case someone is, they're high and in that state, are dangerous to themselves or others. That individual is there to help. But they're with a mental health worker, because what that individual needs is really mental health and addiction services, right? And so I think those approaches take us along the way of where we need to get to make sure that we are offering the right response to the call for service.
So last follow-up, sorry guys,
Yeah.
I don't want to take all this time, but it is a clarifying question, because our call is for a civilian-led response. PAC and Make Poverty History is a civilian-led crisis response unit, as opposed to police, because of course with ARC, it still goes to 911. 911 still sends police officers, and those police officers then call ARC.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what do you think
Well,
about a completely different system for those calls?
I'm open to the discussion. At the end of the day, what we need is this. When someone calls 911 and they're in crisis, or they're calling because someone else is in crisis, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that that individual in crisis is getting the right response, the right agency to respond to them. And so I think if we start from who's at the end of the call, making the call, and what do they need, and work backwards from there, I think we can continue to modify and change our systems for the sake of the people in need.
We have one more follow-up, if that's okay.
Okay.
I responded to a person in crisis a few months ago, was ready to die by suicide. They did not want me to call the police because they were a trans person who had already had really awful experiences with the police. And I had the best experience in terms of a crisis call, and called the 24-hour safe space from Spence Neighborhood Association, who came down. My reflection after that, and a lot of people I talked to, is that because of the work I do, I know about that safe space, but few people might have done that. So a lot of people might have listened to this person's needs, but saw that they were in immediate danger and thought the police was the only response. So one of the things might be there, especially if we're advocating for this civilian-led response, would be letting citizens know how might we respond to things in a way that's talking about the services available, and one that also is a person-centered approach. So would that be something also in terms of the communications, or how we get citizens to think a bit more about how to respond?
In an answer, yes. Right. We need to always be improving and making sure again that individuals are getting the right response and the help. I've been working through my campaign with and speaking to 2 mothers who tragically, their children, adult children, took their own lives. We're talking about the need and more for peer support training. That when someone is in, has suicidal thoughts, perhaps the best response to them is someone who understands them, who's been down that journey, right? And for police officers and others who are well-meaning and doing their job, they're trying to do the job to their best ability. If someone who's almost like a peer support can respond, who understands and can work with that individual, that may be the better response. So we can continue to modify, change, and look at our systems so that we're making sure that the right agency is responding to that call for service.